by Julie Kesh, the President and CEO of the Center for Rural Policy and Development, and I will say is also a fellow Waseca County resident. I know each of the folks here you can see on the screen too clearly come from a whole wide range of areas in the federal government. We've got HUD here, we've got the telecommunications program in Minnesota and Wisconsin, NTIA, as I mentioned, the SCC, and Tribal Broadband Connectivity and Nation-to-Nation Coordination Division 2 at NTIA. So, and Theron is joining us virtually, actually. So we'll be able to really lean into that hybrid experience. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Julie. I'd like to say that she is, for Waseca County, the poster child for bad broadband. So I can't think of a better person to really get to nail this group of people with questions, because I know from experience, Julie's got a lot of needs from all of you. Thank you.
I'm glad that you're coming back from coffee. I know it's hard coming back from coffee and snacks and talking with people, but yes, like Benya said, I live in southern Waseca County on our family's farm. I moved back from Washington, D.C. 5.5 years ago. Knowing that the broadband was pretty non-existent, hasn't gotten much better, but I'm really, really excited because our local ISP is putting in a border-to-border broadband grant, and it's for 200 homes in rural Waseca County in that area. And if you ever need anyone to testify on why broadband is important, you know, rural Minnesota is actually growing a little bit. And we're only going to get rural Minnesota to grow even more if we have reliable broadband. There's a lot of people that want to work remotely, like myself. I just spoke to students yesterday at Gustavus College, and I had to go into Waseca to my aunt's place to use her internet so that it wasn't disruptive to the class. And I do that with webinars. I do that probably once or twice a week. So yes, I'm the poster child for bad broadband, so for bad internet. But without further ado, we're going to get started. And so each of our speakers has some slides that they're going to go through. And at the end, we'll do questions. So we're just going to get started right now, and we'll start with James. Yeah, if you each want to just speak into the microphone so that everyone can hear at home.
Okay, hi everybody. My name is James Baltazar. I'm a senior analyst with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and I work in the Minneapolis field office. Part of my duties in our field office is that I'm our local Connect Home point of contact, and I'm also just personally very interested in seeing what we can do to help close the digital divide, particularly here in Minnesota, where I work.
Are the slides advancing? Technical difficulties. There we go.
So just to give a brief overview, we have a program called Connect Home USA, and it is a public and private collaboration to help close the digital divide. Primarily, there were 100 public housing authorities nationwide that were selected to be in the first cohort, and this was over a 3-year period. It uses a collective impact model, and while there's no direct funding for the program, there are organizations such as major corporations and some other service providers who have committed to help close the digital divide by offering low-cost internet access through local ISPs, and also discounts for PCs, tablets, and just other programs that can also help with digital literacy, and just a few other things. It's been a great program, and I'm very happy to help support it here in Minnesota. Nationally, there have been over 72,000 connections, over 30,000 devices distributed, and nearly $27 million in records value. What we're thinking on Connect Home, they are expanding, so they're looking for not only additional housing authorities, particularly in our region, which includes Minnesota, but also some local organizations that may be able to support the work as well. Additionally, there is a new partnership with Education Superhighway, and we're looking to close the internet gap in 18 million homes nationwide. This is a map of where the Connect Home communities are located. I just want to take 1 or 2 minutes in the little amount of time I have to just go over the types of federally assisted housing, particularly through our agency. And I'll start with public housing. There are approximately 130 public housing authorities here in Minnesota. In terms of our multifamily properties, those are privately managed properties, but they do have some federal subsidy. There are approximately 1,100 properties overall in our multifamily portfolio. There are also other federal agencies such as U.S. Department of Agriculture, Office of Rural Development. They have a multifamily housing program, primarily focused in rural areas, that is similar to our HUD multifamily housing. Additionally, our public housing properties, there are 3,300 public housing authorities around the country. There are approximately 130 in Minnesota. And they also oversee the Housing Choice Voucher Program, more commonly known as Section 8. Our multifamily properties, there are approximately 570 multifamily assisted properties, which are properties where we have direct oversight that also have subsidies, and these are all low-income residents. And also there are some properties such as master tax credit properties, which I'll get to in a second, that are overseen by the State Housing Finance Agency, which is Minnesota Housing. Rest of the Office of Native American Programs, our Eastwood Woodlands office is centered in, or the closest point of contact would be our Chicago Regional Office. So if you are representing a tribe, and if you have any questions on our Office of Native American Programs, please contact that office directly. I do want to make a quick point that a lot of local localities would be interested in our Community Development Block Grant Program, or CDBG. That funding is available for wide use in a lot of activities, and particularly through broadband development. The state of Minnesota is already using CDBG dollars for broadband, and those are direct grants to the state of Minnesota. And if you have any questions on CDBG, or if you are a CDBG recipient and you have any questions on, well, can we use broadband for this use, contact our office directly, and we'll put you in touch with the folks who can provide further assistance. And I know we're running out of time, so I just wanted to finally speak on a lot of what HUD can provide in terms of closing the digital divide is data analysis. We have an amazing open data site here at our EGIS storefront, which is our portal for all the publicly available data that we have. And among the most popular are multifamily properties. We have a data set that is geocoded, so you can enter it into your mapping software, whether it's ArcPro or ArcGIS or any of the other mapping tools. We have housing choice vouchers by tract, public housing developments, buildings, and also annually we get a long-term housing tax credit data set from the state of Minnesota. And these are all publicly available. And finally, I'll close with, this is an example of some of the data that we can provide. We have information on public housing residents, or multifamily properties with demographic information when publicly available. And finally, there are mapping software available on our website, and you can extract data, create custom data sets, and extract that data as well. If you have any questions about data sets, or just any other questions about how I can support the work you're doing, please reach out to me directly. I'll be happy to help. Thank you.
Great, thank you, James. Next, we're going to hear from Andre Boning. He is the General Field Representative for Minnesota and Wisconsin Telecommunications and Rural Development. Welcome, Andre. Oh, yes, microphone.
Hello, I'm the General Field Representative of the Telecom Program at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and our program has been doing some type of program since Minnesota. This is going to be pretty fast, so if you have any questions, get a hold of me later on. Not too many. There's basic programs. I'm not getting into distance learning or telemedicine programs because that's really an application, it's not really broadband. Telecommunications, the first one since 1949. That's when we started going from party lines to single party lines. And I remember even in the late 90s when we started doing dial-up internet, should it take 28 to 56? That was a big deal. Should we finance that? Or fiber optic cables. You only need one or two, why would we need four? The rural broadband program, that's a farm bill thing since 2000. Right now that is unfunded, but that will be in the future. Community Connect grant program, that was in 04, 19 years ago. That's another grant program. And the Reconnect program, that's since about 2019, that's brand new. And by the way, they all fund broadband in one form or another. These are some of the Minnesota investments since 2010. You can see the telecommunications infrastructure program, that's the bulk of the money. Reconnect program, there's some in process right now. Distance learning, we're not really concerned about for this particular conference. Community Connect, and we've been putting some serious money into the state of Minnesota. This is telecommunications infrastructure loan. In fact, there might be some clients here, some of these have been around for 70 years, 60, 70 years. It still works. You can see the standard loan terms, principal deferments, interest rates, go to the FFB. The Federal Reserve, and you'll find out what the interest rates are going to be. Loan maturities, and you have 5 years to build everything out. We will help you on doing this particular loans. If you can't figure out, we will dot the I's and cross the T's and help you out on everything, on those things. Loan applications year-round. It's mostly for small communities. Right now, it's build out speeds 25.3. That can easily be changed. I wouldn't comment on that. I'll show you later. Here's the rural broadband program again. A lot of these programs, the reason why they're different is Congress gave us different pots of money and with slightly different requirements, and they're legally different. So we're required to have them market them and administer them as different programs. But this goes up to communities of less than 20,000. It's all rural based, and there's loan grant guarantees and loan grant accommodations. This is the Community Connect one. There's been a few applicants in Minnesota, not so busy because actually, as was remarked before, the state of Minnesota has done a pretty good job in eliminating the choice from a financial or financial environment, regulatory environment. They've done good. Right now, that should be opening one of these days, next month or two. Grant match 15% and up to $3 million. Those are a little more difficult to get, but they exist. This is the Reconnect. This is the big one. This is the 2023. We're in what we call round 4 right now, and we're going through those right now. I'm told there will be a round 5. I don't know when that will happen, and I don't know exactly the dollars that are going to be put in that. There's grants, loan grants, combination of 50%, 50% loan, 100% grants and loans, and we have special 100% grants for tribal governments and Alaska Native corporations. A lot of those have no matching funds. 100% grant, a lot of the time you have a 25% project match. So it's basically a 75% discount. You have a $10 million project, somebody else is taking $2.5 million. And the reason why we've always done that is our projects for sustainability purposes always work better if there's some skin in the game. People always take it a lot more seriously if it's their own money's involved, and it's sometimes a political commitment, but mostly financial commitment. This one is just a little more details. 3 years principal and interest deferment. The idea of that is you're going to be put in the money, and it takes 2 or 3 years sometimes to get the revenue stream going, and then you can start paying on the principal and interest. You get 5 years, get this thing done. Eligibility speeds, anything less than 100 by 20 megabits is eligible. And again, these speeds might change. because we closely follow the FCC and NTIA, and even though we can do whatever we feel best, that can change right now. You have to do 100 symmetrical speeds if you want to construct that out, minimum. And everyone has to have that accessible, or readily available, within a few weeks, maybe a month at the most. And you'll be looking at that OS for the details, and we're doing round 4 right now. I don't know when the recipients are going to be out pretty soon, I hope. And that's me. Scott's right now. Minnesota, I'm a native. And that's it.
Great. Thank you so much, Andre. Next, we're going to move on to Tom Karst. He is a federal program officer from Minnesota with NTIA.
Thank you, Julie. I'm Tom Karst. I'm the federal program officer dedicated to and based in Minnesota for the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. This is the number you've been hearing a lot, the $42.5 billion to get 100% access to high-speed internet. We know Minnesota's been doing a great job. We also know the remaining bits are going to be the most challenging, which is why it's incredible to have such a group here, because it's going to take all of us together. When we're looking at 100%, we have to start with the definition. What do we actually mean? How is that going to be defined? So it starts on speed. You have the unserved, underserved, and everyone else who already has service. So anyone who has under 25 megabytes per second download, 3 megabytes per second upload is going to be considered unserved. The next tier is your underserved, anyone who has below 100 megabytes per second download, 20 megabytes per second upload. And then there's the layer of technology type. For this particular program, what's going to be considered served is those who are above those speeds and have wireline or licensed fixed wireless service. Any other services, when they're the only one there, are going to be considered unserved. The FCC is working on a map to put together all of those details. Take some time, take a look, review it, make sure things are correct. And when we're looking at serving first the unserved, second the underserved, it's about funding priorities rather than timing. So as Minnesota is developing its plan of how it's going to get to 100%, the plan is going to break down to make sure first everyone who's unserved gets served and then under. But timing for distribution is going to depend on what makes the most fiscal sense to make sure we're making the most of the dollars and get people as connected as quickly as possible. The remaining funds can be used for connecting community anchor institutions and digital equity and inclusion programs, which you'll be hearing more about later. The timeline that we're looking at right now, Minnesota has already been awarded $5 million for its putting together the 5-year plan. This is the framework of how they're going to get to that 100%, and part of what this event is for. That plan is due July 12th. In parallel to that, there's the timeline for the FCC maps, which is going to determine the funding allocation. They're currently reviewing and processing, and always feel free to submit more information. NTIA is going to say on June 30th, these are the maps we're going to use. Here's the funding allocation you're going to get. That is not the ultimate of who is going to be considered unserved. It's the starting point and the funding allocation. When that comes and the number is set, it's going to trigger a 180-day timeline for Minnesota to put together its initial proposal. This is going to be the more funding-informed version of the 5-year plan that's going to lay the rubrics and the groundwork and the framing for how everything is going to go. There's going to be public comment, there's going to be engagement events to make sure that we're hearing from the people who are in these communities, who are doing this work. There's a reason why the federal government is not having 6 people from DC say, here's what needs to be done. There's a reason why local coordination and stakeholder engagement is a requirement. Because we know how much that matters, and we know that's the only way it's going to get it done. As a part of the initial proposal, there's another chunk of a mapping challenge to update who is served, who's unserved, make sure we're getting those counts right. When that's approved through NTIA, it's going to release 20% of the funding allocation, and it's going to kick off a 1-year timeline to put together the final proposal. This is going to be that full breakdown of here's who we're serving, here's who we're awarding, here's how we're doing it, here's our plan, here's our timeline. When we're looking at funding amounts, again, it's going to be that breakdown between those unserved and the high-cost areas, which we know are the difficult ones to serve. That's going to break down the allocation of how much Minnesota gets, plus that $100 million baseline. There's going to be lots of opportunities to get yourselves involved and make sure that not only are your voices heard, your concerns are heard, your assets are known, how communities can engage, how providers can engage, and make sure that these plans are including everything to make this successful, because it is going to be a massive challenge. And it's going to take all of us. It's not just providers and subscribers. It is the entire ecosystem of communities, governments, businesses. Every life that is touched by broadband, every piece of it needs to be part of this discussion, because that's the only way we're going to get there. That's my contact information. I know Evan gave out his phone number. Feel free to meet me. I can give you mine as well. But email is always good too.
Great. Thank you, Tom, so much. We're keeping on moving on with Alejandro Roark, and he's the Chief of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau at FCC. Alejandro.
Hello, good afternoon. It is really good to be in community with you all. It is my first time in Minnesota, so I'm very happy that I'm able to join you on such a warm day. During the warmest season, it really an adventure. I looked out the window and I was like, I never get this type of scenery in DC. But like my colleague said, and I think like Evan said, I'm going to start off by saying my name is Alejandro Roark. This is my email, and now I need to update the slides. So you guys have my phone number. You can text me. Just know that all of our government phones, they require like a 15-digit passcode, and it scans your face, and it's got a fingerprint. So if we're slow to respond, it's because I'm having a hard time logging into my phone. So for those of you that are familiar or not familiar, the Federal Communications Commission is an independent federal agency that's responsible for implementing and enforcing America's communication laws and regulations. I happen to have the honor of serving as the Chief of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, which develops and implements the Commission's consumer policies, including disability access. We serve as the face of the Commission through outreach and education, as well as through our Consumer Complaint Center, who is responsible for responding to consumer inquiries and complaints. We also maintain collaborative partnerships with the state, local, and tribal governments in critical areas such as emergency preparedness, the implementation of new technologies, and as of this year, my bureau also established the FCC's first federal grant program. So more on that in a second. So digital equity is not just an important area of focus for me, for the FCC, and for Chairwoman Rosenworcel. It really is an agency-wide priority. And part of what that means for us in practice is that we are actively working to ensure that we develop maps with granular and accurate level data, that we are closing the broadband affordability gap, the Affordable Connectivity Program, and that we are establishing rules and model policies to help prevent digital discrimination. And I think lastly, and I think something that I think a lot of it kind of moves through my bureau, is that we have an inclusive and accessible consumer engagement process that allows us to promote policies that bridge digital disparities and extend our country's telecommunication resources to everyone, everywhere. I think what is clear today, especially in this room, and I think with everybody that's here, is that bridging our country's digital opportunity divide is a team lift. And it takes focused leadership in Congress, across the federal government, within the public and private sectors, and on the ground in the communities that we all call home. So I'm I'm really happy I can join you guys today to provide a quick update on some of the priority issues so you guys are kind of well informed. I also want to acknowledge that throughout the course of today, and I mean even just the first two panels and presentations, we are throwing a lot of information at you. We know that. That's why we really say, like, shoot us an email, shoot us a text. We are happy. I'm happy to connect you directly to the teams that are leading this work. We want you all to have a direct connection so that we are ultimately here to help and facilitate and provide support however we can. So first, which is top of mind for everyone, is MAPS. So I want to kind of provide a quick update on our broadband data collection effort and the first public pre-production draft of the National Broadband Act we released in November. So for background, the Broadband Data Act directed the FCC to develop new, highly granular maps of fixed broadband service availability on a location-by-location basis nationwide and standardized maps of mobile broadband service availability. Hopefully, you guys have all had a chance to play with those maps. If you haven't, take a look. I mean, I've heard from kind of digital equity practitioners across the states when they first got a chance to play with the maps, and I think that what really stuck with me is somebody from, I think, a rural part of Cleveland said to me, I feel like you guys heard us. This is all the information we've been asking for and we've been needing, and for the first time, I think it's available to all of us on demand 24 hours a day. So there are two distinct categories of information or data that populate these maps. So one, we have the fabric data, which is essentially information about all the locations throughout the United States and territories that currently have or should have access to broadband services. So think of those as like the buildings that should be on the map that are serviceable locations. And then we have availability data, which is reported to the FCC by both fixed and wireless internet service providers. And the new map also provides the public and other stakeholders, provides us all a chance to make corrections or challenges, as we call them, as needed. So I want to kind of underscore that because for the first time in our country's history, we all have a voice in those maps. And it's not a super cumbersome process where you have to go to a separate website or submit an online form or do all these kind of very difficult processes that I think we're all way too familiar with in this room. But you can go directly on the map where you are seeing that there is either an availability error, whether it's a fabric data error. You can literally click on that location, click into it, and submit a challenge right there. It'll give you a pop-up. It'll say, I don't think this is accurate because why? I want to submit a challenge in this way. Or it says, I want to submit an informal complaint through our informal complaint process. Or I just want to flag it for you guys, and I want you to know that this is an error based on my experience. And you can submit that all, again, right from the map, right on the website, which I think is super exciting. I'm very excited about these maps. And again, hopefully if you play with them, you will also kind of feel what's going on. We also have the availability at the state and local level, really at the national level, but I think most effective at the state level, to submit bulk challenges to the map. So all of your teams, you guys are able to either look at the maps and aggregate local information that you want to upload into the maps. One strategy that we think is really effective is to really do some type of a local public awareness campaign to crowdsource this information. We all have local community members, we all have people that have that mindset that like to play with maps, that love to be online, if they're fortunate to have access already. We're all those gamers in our communities that I think are really happy and would really love to know that they can literally go and play with these maps and submit data challenges. So lots of different ways to get the information in there. And I think the other thing that I think I'm really excited about is that these challenges will continue on an ongoing basis to help improve the maps forever, right, or the foreseeable future. So we really invite you to take a look at the map, ensure that we have the information for your location that is correct. And if you want to participate in that full challenge process, please visit fcc.gov broadband data to learn more. On that website, you'll also find helpful videos, an outreach toolkit, a link to the Help Center. We have dedicated teams that, when you submit something to the Help Center and ask a question, it doesn't just go into some cloud and disappear. There are dedicated teams that read those comments, will reach out. If you want them to provide a briefing to you, the chairwoman was on the phone talking to every state and governor's office and broadband offices to say, hey, we are here. If you need help, please talk to us. And again, we have dedicated teams that are there to provide that technical support, both at the FCC and also through our technical support vendors who essentially develop the map. So know that there's a lot of help there. One thing that I also want to kind of flag for you guys is the first collection of provider availability data occurred last summer, and the second collection is now underway. So essentially how it works is broadband providers will tell us this is where, based on our calculations, broadband is available at these speeds or through this mode. And then at that point, we now have a voice to say, actually, my experience in my community, in my house, in this neighborhood is either, yes, that works, or no, I'm not getting this level of service that is as it reported, or I'm not getting it at all. So again, this is an iterative process that will continue, and we all are able to submit challenges whenever we would like. So this collection is really important because it advances digital equity by providing granular, community-level, neighborhood-by-neighborhood data about where broadband availability is throughout our country. And like I said, it will evolve over time as we continue to gather more and more data. These granular level maps will help us identify those unserved and underserved communities most in need of funding for high-speed internet projects. So apart from that map, the FCC is also developing another mapping tool. The FCC is collaborating with other federal agencies to create an upcoming federal funding map. And this map was required by the Infrastructure Act as well, and will essentially layer information about where federal funding has been committed for broadband deployment over the FCC's National Broadband Map. So combining that information about where high-speed internet is currently available with information about what broadband infrastructure projects are already funded or will be funded to help states and other federal partners better identify the areas that will benefit the most from future funding. So again, the map tells us where we are today. The new kind of mapping tool that we'll be rolling out later this year will then, I think, take all the decisions that all our federal partners are making, that will overlay that on the map, so you will be able to kind of track at the community level where broadband is going to expand. And also, I think that gives us all the opportunity to raise a hand, flag, course correct as needed, or just ensure that the plans that we are developing are as accurate and really kind of help us achieve that 100% broadband access goal, right? Sorry, that was a lot about math, but I know people really committed to this, so I wanted to be as thorough as possible. Okay, there we go. So I'm also really happy and excited to talk about the Affordable Connectivity Program. Really happy that it was mentioned in the previous panel because many Americans live in a place where there is some type of internet access available, but affordability continues to be the #1 most cited barrier to access. So the price of broadband is keeping this essential service out of reach for many households. So the Affordable Connectivity Program affords eligible households and provides a discount of up to $30 a month toward the cost of establishing a new or existing internet service for households, and up to $75 a month for households who live on federally recognized plans. So for all of us that I think shop for internet, those numbers may seem a little bit low, but again, the good news, right, that I try to underscore is many of the participating internet service providers offer high quality, high-speed plan that would be entirely covered by the Affordable Connectivity Program. So on the last panel, when she said, as we're building out and doing a lot of public investment, we want to make sure that those people that are really on, and I think it's actually a requirement from NTIA, that they do offer a high-speed plan that would be covered by the Affordable Connectivity Program. So again, that's another tool in our toolbox. And there's more information at just fcc.gov/ACP. I won't go too into it, but essentially if you or anybody in your community participates in any kind of federal assistance programs such as SNAP, Medicaid, public housing, Social Security, WIC, it makes you automatically eligible to participate in the Affordable Connectivity Program. So again, at the state and local level, where we have a lot of leaders in the room, one of the best ways that you can help support that enrollment process to ensure that there is a data matching agreement with the FCC. So a lot of these programs are run or administered at the local level. If we can connect your system to the FCC system, essentially it makes households wanting to apply and qualify for the program almost instantaneously. Otherwise, they have to submit documentation, or it just becomes a little bit of a longer process. But that's one small tweak that we can all do to ensure that when people go to the website to sign up, it's quick, it's easy, and people can get the benefit as soon as they need it. All right, so we also wanted to ensure that you guys had help to help spread the word about the Affordable Connectivity Program. So to date, we have over 15 million households that have been enrolled, and many more, like I mentioned, are still eligible and not yet enrolled. So to help do this community level outreach, the FCC established the first federal grant program, outreach program, specifically targeted to expand innovative outreach efforts nationwide to strengthen partner networks, and by empowering them with the resources necessary to increase program awareness and enrollment, with a focus on reaching historically unserved and underserved communities. So there's essentially this pot of funding, so $60 million was established for a national competitive grant outreach program. $10 million was set aside specifically for a tribal competitive outreach program. There's a Your Home, Your Internet pilot program with $5 million, and an ACP Navigator pilot program. So all of those kind of windows to apply were in January 9th, and we are currently going through the merit and eligibility review process. And I think our goal is to be able to get some of this money out the door by the end of March. So please stay tuned to that, because that is also something very exciting. And we have at the commission committed to a minimum allocation to every state of at least $500,000. Again, that's a floor, that's not a cap. So, so every state will receive funding to promote the Affordable Connectivity Program. And the last thing that I will flag for you guys is our efforts to prevent digital discrimination. So as you know, the Infrastructure and Investment Job Act tasked the FCC with establishing model policies to achieve the prevention and elimination of digital discrimination. So that's a big task. And so what essentially we did is, number one, Chairwoman Rosa-Marshall established a task force to prevent digital discrimination. I myself was part of that task force, along with Demona Terry and Sanford Williams, who both are special advisors to the Chairwoman and Chairwoman's office. And our focus is essentially to create rules and policy to combat digital discrimination and to promote equal access to broadband across the country, regardless of zip code, income level, ethnicity, race, religion, and national origin. So we issued an NOI, a notice of inquiry, for each country. Also, recently, I think in December, we released a notice of proposed rulemaking where we are seeking comment on potential rules to address digital discrimination. So the questions that we are asking is really how do we define equal access? What does facilitating equal access mean? And how do we prevent and eliminate digital discrimination? This isn't a decision that we are hoping to make arbitrarily. Our goal really is to engage communities on the ground, and we've been meeting with a lot of civil rights leaders at the national level. We are announcing a regional listening tour across the country. You know, I would love to come back to Minnesota and talk to you guys and hear about your experience on the ground. We really want your perspectives to be able to inform the process and the ultimate outcome of this proceeding. So again, my name is Alejandro. This is my contact info. Please feel free to reach out. Don't be shy. I'm sorry that it took a large part of the afternoon. I hope this is helpful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alejandro. I know we're right at time, but we still would like to go virtual to Theron. If we could get them up.
I should be here.
Hello, wonderful. Welcome. You've got a room full of eager listeners. Go ahead.
Bonjour, everyone. Hello. Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you came from. My name is Theron Buckman. I'm the Federal Program Officer for the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program in the Nation-to-Nation Coordination Division. I'm your Midwest Federal Program Officer, so I handle everybody up here in Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa, and Indiana, all the federally recognized tribes. So I'm up here to provide technical support for the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program. My duty station is up a little bit north of where you are down there. I'm up in Ashland, Wisconsin, so the background out here is a little ways outside of my house. But just quickly, the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program is about a $2 billion program now that's established with the Consolidated Appropriations Act. We're out here to provide specifically broadband grants to tribal nations and to administer those grants for tribal nations. At this point, we've put out about 132 awards for $1.7 billion, and we are busy getting that money sorted out, organized, and out to the tribes that apply. We're also working on putting together the second notice of funding opportunity for the remaining funds in our program, which will be out sometime this spring. And the tribes will have 6 months to put together an application, and we will get the rest of that money out to try to connect the areas in the Midwest as well as the rest of the United States on the tribal lands that don't have broadband or connectivity. Can you move to the next slide, please? One back, and it seems to be the double thing. Essentially, the things that we're doing out that they wanted me to bring up is the Tribal Broadband Leaders Network for any of the tribal leaders and tribal representatives in the room. And that Leaders Network is here for an opportunity to basically get out there and speak with other people who have connectivity problems, have tribal broadband connectivity loans, and are looking to talk to others in their area. So if you're interested in the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program, on the next slide, there is contact information for Matt Rogowski. He's the program officer in charge of that, and as well as my contact information and the emails to get a hold of our program. So if you're a tribal nation, you're representing a tribal nation in Minnesota, and you have connectivity problems, you have connectivity plans, make sure you share them with the BEAD program, and if you can apply to the second notice of funding opportunity that is coming out for TBCP. Otherwise, everyone else in the room is, from the tribal nations, is probably familiar with me already, and I've been working with you on a grant. So I look forward to being able to help the tribal nations in Minnesota and the rest of the Midwest, and thank you for the rest of my colleagues in the USDA, FCC, and Tom on the BEAD program for presenting today.
Thank you so much, Farron. Glad that you could join us virtually. We are at time, so I'm going to encourage you, if you have questions for any one of our panelists, I am guessing they would be happy to answer your questions during lunch or during break. So thank you. Let's give a round of applause for our panelists. And thank you all for being here today and wanting to help solve the situation with broadband. So I'll turn it back over to Ben now.
Okay, thank you, Julie, and thank you again to this panel. We'll give another round of applause. It is always a tricky job to share so much information, and your slides were beautiful, your information was incredibly helpful, and I'm very glad we were getting close to lunch, so all of us will have some time to ask you more refined questions too. So thank you. The next part of our afternoon, we're going to be laying the stage now for our conversation around digital equity. I'm going to ask the panelists to start coming to this stage. You can start coming now and get yourself seated as I share and introduce this panel. Beware the steps, it's a climb getting up here. But I'm very excited for this group to lay a very strong foundation for us to think about digital equity today. We have as panelists Phil Essington, Director of the Broadband and Digital Inclusion at Hennepin County, Jay Hopla, the Associate State Director of Community Engagement at the AARP, Jenny Larson, Executive Director of the Three Rivers Community Action, Linda Larson, Executive Committee Member of the Minnesota Farmers Union, and then coming in virtually is Eric Sievers, and the Executive Director of the Hiawatha Valley Mental Health Center. And leading us in this discussion, I'm excited to welcome to the stage Talia Palmer. She is, as we know, the Chief Executive Officer of the Blanding Foundation. So thank you to this group for joining us and really laying out the foundation of why does digital equity matter and how do we make sure to integrate community voices in the state's development of the digital equity plan. So with that, over to you, Talia.
Good morning. This is the best part of the panel, the best part of the conference. This is all about digital equity, why we're here, creating access and opportunity. I'm really excited to be a part of this. I appreciate that. Before we get started, I want to kind of warm up the room. It's been a long morning. We sit down. Despite 17 years of work in broadband at Blandon and my passion for it, technical conversations can start to get kind of dry. So I want to ask a few questions of the audience. If you would raise your hands and we'll kind of loosen up a little bit. Who all has come from an area that's not part of the 7-county metro area? Could you raise your hand, please? All right, right people in the room for digital equity conversation. Who all came from Tribal Nation? Awesome, thank you for being here. I point that out to the room for a few things. One, I want to make a comment about the disproportionate responsibilities on rural leaders. When we take time away from our homes, we have an opportunity, cost, and return on investment that we always consider. Many people sitting in this room are likely also on school boards. You're likely also in other rooms that are equally important, and we're constantly splitting hairs between what our priorities are. So thank you for coming. This panel is designed specifically to answer needs that are really real to you as you address access and opportunity. As I thought about coming into this space, I reflected on starting at the Blandon Foundation in July of 2020, when the state shutdown had happened, shortly after George Floyd's murder, and using Zoom for the first time after 25 years of doing community development, fumbling around awkward Zoom, meeting each other, figuring out how we communicate, and then dealing with the fact that many people we work with did not have strong enough broadband to sit in meetings and have access to the conversations we were having. It was a pivotal moment in my life in terms of understanding who has access and who is heard, also influences what change happens in Minnesota. Blandon Foundation has been working with broadband in rural and tribal communities for approximately 17 years. Our public policy issues begin with creating community awareness and then community engagement. And so we've spent the last 18 months preparing to transition with the onboarding of federal funding, since our charter doesn't allow for us to supplement public dollars. So I wanted to take a minute there to just orient the room. I want to thank you for coming. I want to be real about what had happened during the pandemic and what we learned and how very serious this topic is. I know in my first day of serving at the foundation, I received many phone calls from parents in communities on and near Leech Lake Reservation, people who could not have their children participate in school, children who have fallen behind. We are not aware of the educational loss that has taken on our children and therefore our workforce and the social determinants of health. And even though it's really nice to be together in person, it is important that we don't forget how much that really was and how difficult it was for everybody, and how important this conversation is. So thank you again for being here. The introduction have shared that Phil, Jay, Jenny, Linda, Eric, online are here to answer some questions, and my job is to answer a few questions, but I also want to let you know that we'll be taking questions from the audience. I think, Benny, do you have the microphone that you'll be able to do that?
Yes.
So if you all are ready, we'll get going. I know we're on a time clock, and I'm pretty sure everybody's hungry. The National Digital Equity Inclusion Alliance defines digital equity as a condition in which all individuals and communities have the information technology capacity needed for full participation in our society, democracy, and economy. What does your role entail, and how has your work shaped the understanding you have of digital equity? And let's go this way. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Phil Essington from Hennepin County. I'm the director of our Office of Broadband and Digital Inclusion. I appreciate the question. We started really investing in digital equity whenever the county was formed, because we have a library system, we have a human services department, we touch a lot of lives in a lot of different ways. But of course, as you mentioned at the beginning of the pandemic, everything changed. And I've been fortunate to lead now a team of 9 people focused specifically on expanding broadband and digital equity to our 1.2 million residents. We have been very fortunate to have the support of our county board members, and we have a wealth of community partners and staff throughout the county who have been very supportive in helping us do that. So that's where we're coming.
Well, thank you. Hello, everybody. Jay Appel with AARP here in Minnesota. And we're a big membership association for people over the age of 50. Focus very much on folks and their financial security, their health, creating livable communities that are inclusive and supportive for older adults. And when it comes to the Digital Equity Act, of course, older adults are a covered population within this program that we're all here discussing today. But they also make up an outsized percentage of the other covered populations, whether we're talking about folks with disabilities or people of color, and all the other categories that we're focusing on. So there's 1 million older adults in Minnesota. It's near a quarter of our population who are near retirement age or in retirement age. Not that everyone's retired, many are still working in their older years. Telehealth and older adults are not synonymous. People who are older are using the internet for a lot of different purposes, and it's essential to all of our lives, and it's not just telehealth. But just let me also add, we were at the table making sure older adults were included in this law from the beginning, and as we get throughout the process of how the infrastructure and other funds are allocated here in Minnesota, we'll be making sure that older adults are included too.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Jenny Larson. I'm the Executive Director at Three Rivers Community Action. I'm not a broadband expert, and so it's really nice to be in a room full of people working on something that is going to help the people that I work with every single day. And those are people with low incomes, with moderate incomes, and people who are trying to get ahead in their communities. So as a community action agency, Three Rivers is one of 24 agencies that are working to address the causes and conditions of poverty across the state. There are also 1,000 community action agencies across the country. And one of the things that we care a lot about is involving the people that we're serving in decision making. So we have people who are using our programs who serve on our board of directors, on advisory committees. We do needs assessments in the community every 3 years. We ask what's going on, what needs are you seeing, and what can we, and then we use that to plan and work with our local partners to address those issues. And I will say, for forever, I've been doing this for over 20 years, the issues have always been housing and transportation and energy assistance and nutrition programs and education programs. And recently, it's been internet access, broadband access, having the tools that they need at home for work, for school, to apply for resources, and to have access to resources. And so I'm really excited that we can have this conversation today.
Hello, everyone. I'm Linda Larson. We're here representing the Minnesota Farmers Union, which advocates predominantly for our family farmers throughout Minnesota and rural communities. If we ever engage in a conversation, you'll hear me repeat the same sentence over again. Not everybody who lives in rural Minnesota is an urban dweller wannabe. A lot of people want to live in rural Minnesota because of the culture and the way of life and the community. So to provide broadband would be, I thought, the great equalizer. We have a lot of people who would like to be entrepreneurial in rural Minnesota who don't have reliable internet access, and so they can't do their commerce that way. The same with education, which we all know the story about that. as well as telemedicine. So our role is to advocate for the fully functioning, reliable, accessible, affordable, high-speed internet to every resident, including the farm of the last farm on the last mile, to be provided to all of our residents throughout Minnesota. And thank you for the opportunity to be here to represent them today.
We have Eric on the line.
So, I appreciate the opportunity. I'll jump in quick here. Eric Sievers, I'm the executive director with Hiawatha Valley Mental Health Center. So, I lead a nonprofit community mental health center in the very southeastern part of our state, which serves a 5-county area. So, very rural. Our mission is to provide exceptional, responsive, consumer-focused behavioral health services. So within that population that we serve, about 70% are on medical assistance. The range of our service area from one end to the other is over 100 miles. So when pre-pandemic, we provided about 9% of our services through telehealth. During the pandemic, obviously, it went up significantly, and today about 40%. We learned over the last years that when we think of health equity, it really depends for a lot of folks on digital equity. And we learned that in our 5-county service area, there's big gaps in access to internet, and because it's just not available, and also it's not affordable for a lot of the people we serve. So this has become a very significant topic for our service and what we try to offer for people. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for that. We have a list of questions here. I'm going to skip down to the bottom question just to give you a heads up here, because I want to leave some good time for questions from the audience so that we can hear each other. We can hear our oneness in this conversation. Towards the bottom of the list of questions, we were asked to talk about how you collaborate with people and communities you serve to ensure your work aligns with their needs and their overall goals. I'd really like us to just lean into that conversation specifically around the complexity of digital equity in some of our regions in Minnesota. So I can ask you to comment on that.
Well, it's interesting because as I hear everyone introduce themselves here, I'm picking up a theme that there might be some misimpressions about the groups that we all represent here. And maybe one of the themes is that we need to challenge our assumptions about these groups. We oftentimes think that everyone in the metro is connected because the infrastructure is available, but there are a lot of barriers for everybody to get connected. And I think as far as community engagement, I kind of go by the saying that if you're not uncomfortable, you're not learning. And I think it's important for at least someone in my role and in others to really get to know communities that have needs. There are a lot of different communities in Hennepin County with a lot of different challenges. And we're fortunate to have plenty for everybody in Minnesota. I think we all share the goal of getting everyone connected. And so for us in Hennepin, it's important to reach out to all of the different communities, folks who have all kinds of different living situations, different ages, different life circumstances, and really unlock their potential. I worry that we are missing out on a big piece of Minnesota's future and Minnesota's economy to the extent that folks aren't able to get connected. And certainly infrastructure is the starting place for them to get connected, but it happens that something as simple as a past billing dispute with the cable company can interrupt a low-income program that might subsidize your service. And I won't ask the room to raise your hand if you've had a billing dispute with your cable or cell phone company, but my hand would be up. So there could be all kinds of challenges, but really getting to know these communities, especially in pockets where you might not be familiar, in pockets where there are significant needs.
Sorry to talk about how people are living longer and working longer, using the internet in their older years for a lot of different purposes, but it's true that when it comes to adoption rates and use rates. Younger people, there's a gap there with older people and younger people and how many are connected. Some of that is just about the demographics and the geography of where older people live in rural communities or older neighborhoods in the metro area. But some of it is about education. So at ARP, we have a rapidly expanding digital skill building program called Older Adults Technology Services. So OATS is the program that we run. So that's important. And then one of the, we work with the state of Minnesota and the Governor's Council for an age-friendly Minnesota, and they have made a number of recommendations that have a lot of focuses, I guess, or a lot of different initiatives coming out of that. One of them is to get more internet connectivity across the state, so they're focused there too. But the survey that we conducted through that state group, 93% of respondents who were over the age of 45 said internet connection is important or very important. So we know that to be a fact. And then I'll just share one other thought on older adults and using the internet that I had last night. And it's, if I lost my work laptop and my tech support that comes through my employment, that would be a hardship for me. And I think that's what a lot of our older Minnesotans are facing, is that they don't have that same sort of service available to them. So that's why I think that older adults are a priority in the covered population here in this program.
In Minnesota, about 1 in 10 people are living in poverty, and those numbers go up if you're a BIPOC household, if you're an older adult, if you're a child. And so what we're really looking for is what are some of the solutions that we can implement to really get at the issues that those folks who are maybe a little bit, have a little bit less access than others do. And so we, like I mentioned, we do needs assessments, and in 2021, which was our most recent, we asked our community partners what their needs were, what the needs in the community were, and 42% of our partners identified high-speed internet as a critical need for their clients. And then when we asked our clients and customers what their needs were, anywhere between 11 and 20%, kind of depending on which county they were in. Some of our counties are more rural than others, said that they don't have internet at home. And some of that's because the internet isn't available at their home in the rural areas, and some of it's because they can't afford the internet at their home. And so what we did after getting that result is looking at kind of what can we do about this. And so I'm just going to give you a couple of examples of things that we've done. One is we talked to our schools to make sure that they had mobile hotspots. Most of them were already on it because COVID was happening at the time, and they needed their students to have access at home. But then also making sure that devices are available. So you need to have a smartphone, or you need to have a tablet or a laptop to access. So we were connecting with our libraries and our schools to make sure that devices and hotspots were available. And I think the other thing that we did is we looked to our partners who are leading organizations that are serving communities of color. So we hired some outreach staff, and we were working directly with communities of color on what their needs were, internet and a lot of other things at the time and currently, and really trying to get to know folks who maybe weren't coming to us. So how can we go out to them? And how can we go into their communities? How can we help bring people who speak their language into the community, figure out what their needs are, what their experiences are, and then how can we then connect them to those resources that we know are there and available. And then if the resources aren't there, how can we go about getting those additional resources into the community?
At the Farmers Union, we're really very strong advocates for our members throughout Minnesota, and so we're very active lobbying our elected officials at every level, federal, state, county, municipal, because it is so vital to our current economy and education, telehealth, all of the different subject matters that we've already mentioned. And so what we do is we're very engaged with our members all across the state who then testify and tell their stories to the policymakers so that people understand the impact of having digital equity or not. And that it's really undeniable when you see a person's actual real life story about we do many other things, particularly to educate our members about how to use the technology, how to access the technology. But it's still dependent upon the service to be provided to our members and to all Minnesota citizens. And so we try to be a voice for everybody.
So, one of our values is partnership and collaboration, and the way we strategically do this with those who utilize our services is very, very diverse. So one of the things, we ask them, which seems kind of obvious, but that does take time. But we ask them in multiple ways. We host quarterly local advisory council meetings with people that utilize services in our area, for them to come in and voice their needs. We ask them through annual surveys about are the ways we provide services, whether it be through telehealth or in person, meeting their needs and what challenges or ideas do they have related to that. So that's one way. We also, at our board level at our agency, last year we added a local advisory committee, or a client advisory committee, which is made up of people that use our services to give feedback to the board on the needs that they're seeing and how we can best provide for them in a health equity way. And then indirectly, the third big area is indirectly through relationships and regular meetings I have in my role with our key partners, including the 5 county health and human services entities, 5 public health agencies, and schools and health systems in our area. So those are the strategies over the years that work very well for us.
Thank you to the panelists for answering that. I just want to take a little test out in the audience. This panel is really designed for you to ask those questions as you go back to your communities as caretakers of this project and working in this way with you. So I just want to feel out if you have questions. Could you raise your hand if you want to talk, if you want to ask some questions or comment on some of the points the panelists have made so far? We've got a question over there. Some others coming up. Okay, thank you.
Hi, thank you for being here. My name is Michael Elsper, and I'm with Samuel Public Library. And I came across an article that talks about digital redlining. And with that, in the studies they share, communities of color or communities of historically redlined areas are offered the same service for a much more expensive price. So with that question, is there any oversight, regulation, or grant binding commitment, which was shared this morning, on predatory practices from the internet service provider? I had a patron come in, we told them there's the Affordable Connectivity Program. They applied, they were quick, they got approved, they meet the criteria, but then afterwards they were slapped with bills. So there's a gap in the agent from the service provider. So, anything that kind of protects the consumer as well as we make this more available for the community.
Good question. I think things are getting better. but there are a lot of challenges out there. We see in Hennepin County too. You mentioned you're from St. Paul Public Library. Yeah. So the article that you mentioned really made its way around our organization as well. I think it was directed toward one particular internet provider, but we see a lot of differences between the available speeds and the available broadband choices depending on geography. It doesn't always work in the way that you might expect. Hennepin has rural, urban, and suburban areas, and so we got challenges in all three of those areas. But I think it's fair to say that one of the earlier panelists mentioned how inadequate the current definition of broadband is with 25 down and 3 up, and so 25 down and 3 up doesn't really get you where you need to be if you have more than one person in the house. And so you could say this area has broadband, but really it doesn't if you have a family that needs to be online at the same time. And that plays into it too. Can you get a gig up and down, or are you limited to 25-3? They're both broadband in a technical sense, so we need to change that. I think from a local government perspective, we're working really hard to make sure in Hennepin County we don't have any unserved areas, we don't have any underserved areas. We're really working toward 100 by 20 at a minimum. But one of the other things that we've said is we want to be sure that our residents have broadband choices to the maximum extent. And we think that that helps everybody. We certainly like to see, new technologies coming out. WISP has presented interesting possibilities, and fiber has been interesting, but there's no doubt that there is a difference, there's a disparity in the infrastructure between locations, and it's a problem.
Yeah, just to, I'm no an expert either, that's for sure, but I think ARP, I know ARP would, needs this funding and infrastructure to be deployed with equity, and that kind of practice needs to be regulated and investigated and not happen. So I think there's, if the market was to just regulate itself, we'd have a lot different system, and it's the reason we have to put billions of dollars of taxpayer money into this to make sure it is equitable.
At our office, we've been helping people connect to the Affordable Connectivity Program as well, and it's great to have this as a resource, but the idea of it gets us so far, and then the regular people who are trying to use it get stuck. We had somebody, I was asking our staff how it's going recently, and we had somebody call us and say, well, their apartment building doesn't have one of the providers that accepts the program. And so they themselves can't qualify or can't get it to them in their own building or in their home where they live because of their landlord didn't use that provider. So, there's always like these little glitches, and so we always end up problem solving at the local level, right? The libraries and your human services organizations and counties and cities, and so we all have to keep kind of checking ourselves, like, okay, so we've gotten this far, what's the next step? What's that next thing that we can do? And people need a place that they can tell their story to so that we can go do something about it.
I joined this panel being a non-expert. So, but what I'm learning today is all the different resources that are available for us to report the lack of service or the disparities or what's being promised and yet what's being delivered or not. And I think that will be something that we will work hard to spread the word about that.
There's another question.
Bonjour, Sally Heine from Legion again, Bonjour. This is not really a question, it's more of a statement. We live in northern Minnesota, and I live near Cass Lake, which is a small town next to Bemidji, in the middle of Bemidji and Grand Rapids. Recently, one of my good friends was looking for a counselor. There are none in Bemidji or Grand Rapids. So, if you're going to look for a counselor, I don't know, you're going to have to go somewhere else. So in my mind, I'm thinking that this digital equity could really benefit those people who are living in rural Minnesota and need a mental health counselor. It's a golden opportunity for the industry to pick up on that role and bring, you know, metro-based counselors to rural Minnesota via the internet. English.
If I could just reply to that quick, is that all right? That's been our experience as a very rural agency whose mission is to provide mental health substance use services. And one of the creative ways we've been able to improve our access is when we've got challenges hiring locally, we've been able to broaden our reach of applicant pools to people who may never live in our community. So that's been a wonderful improvement with better access for people to this technology. The challenge that still exists for some of our rural community mental health providers is, you know, I mentioned earlier, we have a geographic reach of over 100 miles. So if I have a provider who's responding to a mental health crisis situation, and there's another one that comes up an hour away, we hope that person has access to telehealth. And if not, then that's a concern still today. So it's better, but there's room for improvement still.
What else questions? What other questions do we have?
Barbara J. Klein, Leesburg County. I just want to bring up the housing issue again. I have a friend who lives in senior subsidized housing, and her whole complex is paying more for internet television than they are for rent. There's a great scale for how HUD figures out what your rent is going to be, but there are people paying more for internet, and it's, as you said, you don't have the right provider there, you don't have the right this, you don't have the right that, but housing supported, low-income housing is paying more for internet and cable than they are for rent, and that's really sad.
I just wanted to chime in because I agree with you. We have tried really hard to sign people up for the ACP. We've had a lot of the same kind of challenges. We appreciate that internet providers oftentimes have low-income programs that are affordable on paper. There are challenges of getting enrolled. We have hired and assigned staff to help people navigate through those processes. But at the pace that we are working through these challenges, we will all be gone by the time we get everyone connected. And so I think we've really put in a good faith effort in the current model where there are subsidies. And I'm really maybe speaking to some of the folks who have Washington, D.C. addresses in the room, but you know, it's better, it's good, but it's also forcing us to take a look at alternative models where folks don't necessarily have to have an individual account for something that they're only going to use a few hours a day, something where we want to be sure they have good speed, but they may not need to be paying $50, $60, $100 a month for it.
And I can just add, at Three Rivers, we do own several affordable housing apartment buildings, and we've always prided ourselves in having internet available at the building, but what we're realizing now is many of our residents aren't able to pay for it, and so they're not signing up. So what we are working on now is, especially in our new projects where it's a little bit easier to do than retrofitting, but we're starting to look at, can we have places in the building where there's Wi-Fi available? So if you don't have the ability to pay for Wi-Fi in your apartment, you can come down to the community room. You can use Wi-Fi that's in that community room to do your applications, to do whatever you need to do, so that we as an affordable housing provider are at least giving us a little bit there until we can work on getting the affordable connection in every apartment.
Any comments online from Eric? I think it's an interesting comment to talk about regulatory use rates. I'm wondering if the panelists would also talk a little bit about how you brought community together around this topic when we have so many inequitable populations at the table here. I really value having our farmers represented from Minnesota, agriculture, and ourselves to mobilize these issues. And I say that knowing we have climate change and energy transition in front of us, which will also affect these rates of energy consumption. So how did you bring community together to advance advance this need?
I can start it. Maybe we do it all the time. We're always talking to people, to our partners, to their community members, to people who are using our services, asking them how it's going, what the needs are. They're on our board. I feel like we're always convening, especially in rural areas and smaller communities. We all know each other, so our partner organizations, we're working on housing together, we're working on childcare together, we're working on broadband together, and so it's a little bit of a luxury in a more rural area that we have fewer people, so it's easier to get to know each other. But I think it's just a matter of you have to make an effort, and then you have to look around at your table and say, who's not here? And if they're not here, why aren't they here? And then we have to go out and make sure that we have seats at the table for them, and that we're bringing them to the table to participate as well.
If I could just add to that quick. It is true, it takes effort, time, and cost. So our agency, we have a cost of bringing the community together through our local advisory meetings that we have quarterly. So there's staff time spent going out, picking up people, bringing them to the meeting to be part of the conversation, to learn from them how we can best serve them. Knowing that time and cost is going to be very beneficial in the long run for the community. So that's something we have done for many years and will continue to do. The other quick thing is really getting feedback on an ongoing basis through annual surveys and through department meetings from our employees who are out in the communities every day, helping people that have the needs that we're trying to help support with. So that's our role with it.
Yeah, for ARP, it's hard to answer the question because it's so central to what we do, bringing our, in Minnesota we have 630,000 members, people who are over the age of 50, and one great strength for our organization is the ability to listen and convene our members, the public, and our partners, and bring our resources to bear. So it's just part of the way we do business. Increasing over the pandemic with our ability to reach people across the state with Zoom meetings and such, of course, that requires folks to have access and ability to utilize it, but it's just central to what we do.
I'd like to add a comment that we haven't discussed, and I don't really have a solution for it, but having access doesn't mean automatically that you will access the technology. Older people, many of us anyway, don't know how to use a computer, to Zoom, for all the various reasons. I think about farmers who use the precision farming technology that's, let's just use John Deere as an example. When a farmer buys a piece of machinery that has that technology on it, they actually get a training for how to use it and how to send in the reports, how to download all of the technology, so they don't just buy it and send it home with them and say, well, good luck. So in our communities, the average age of a farmer in Minnesota is 59. So we didn't grow up with computers and the technology of it, and for many people, it's really quite intimidating. And they will literally cut themselves off from opportunities rather than face the stress of trying to learn something. They don't want to look stupid, So it's not always the access or the cost, it's also how. And I'm going to suggest that my friend from Harp develop some ways that we go into senior citizen centers and have some laptops set up, you know, to show people how to turn on a computer, how to set up a Zoom, or at least how to participate in a Zoom. That's pretty fundamental. And there are a lot of people who are excluded simply because they don't know how.
So it is older adults technology services, and we have multiple classes every day. Many online, but I can tell you that in St. Cloud, the Whitney Senior Center is going to be offering those classes. Down in Rochester, the 125 Live Center, they'll be offering those educational classes. And like I said at the beginning, they are rapidly expanding, so there will be a lot of opportunity for folks.
Thank you for that.
Testing. Okay, beautiful. Hi, I just have a really quick follow-up question. Do people need to be a member of AARP to access those classes that you just mentioned?
I have a really quick answer. It's no. It's open to anyone.
My mother will be happy to know that. I brought my kids to my mom's house during the pandemic. Please help them. And she's like, I don't know how to turn this on. So we sat for like 10 hours with me trying to teach my mom and not like, you know, had to be nice to my mother. And then my kids ended up going to my sister's, who she isn't here. So I was like, thank you for letting my daughter pass the 3rd grade because she was not going to make it. I really appreciate the comments about aging with integrity in Minnesota. And when we were going through a strategic plan at the Bennett Foundation looking at data trajectories, I want to point out that rural communities are projected to be 30% 65 and older in the next 3 to 5 years. And some counties are looking at 50%, like Aiken County, where half the population will be aging, and how important this part of understanding what Minnesota is to all of us. And then from my past experience in doing a lot of equity work, understanding that if we can see each other and what we're experiencing with this inequity, we can learn from each other. And so what is it that farmers can learn from other populations and vice versa, and then the patterns that we create. And I really hope that we start to actualize our One Minnesota goals as a team, where we can reach across into too much of this us and them business. There are patterns that are showing themselves, and we can help each other in that process. We have some time for some more questions. Are there any more questions? I'm sorry, it's really bright up here. I can't see it.
Okay, there it is.
Thank you.
John Peters again. I just want to say, as a trainer of computer systems to senior citizens, I'd like to talk to the 3 people on my right or to the 3 people on your left at the end of this meeting, so we can discuss what I'm seeing out in the thing. I'm also a member of the Farmers Union and the Farm Bureau, so, okay? Thank you. I just need to do that to make sure we get together. And I used to live in Hamilton County, but it doesn't apply to you.
My question kind of goes on. My name is Jared Peterson, Executive Director of Architect Quality Work, pioneering multi-vendor access owned by community, infrastructure owned by community. I'm wondering on, especially from AARP, Three Rivers, and hearing the pain you guys are dealing with when you run into a scenario where provider is not ACP or the access isn't available. And then we have Phil up there from Hennepin County, and we've got several other county people in the room. When we approve development projects, is there any mechanism that counties or cities will use in order to ensure that there's multiple vendors or a vendor going into that property or whatever the case is, that they'll still have access, and affordable access into those projects?
Since you mentioned it, we are actually, as of this month, partnering with our Housing and Economic Development area at Hennepin to grant fund the build out of Wi-Fi into low-income housing that's being constructed. So we have a very robust grant program to help provide grants for newly constructed low-income housing, and we want to provide Wi-Fi to every unit. And all we ask of the owner-operator is that they provide the internet backbone to that property. So that's something that we're looking into funding very soon. And then we talked also about renovations. There's a lot of multifamily housing that has some aging infrastructure, and we'll be looking into starting a grant program to help upgrade some of that as well, so that everybody has a fair shot at getting good speeds.
I think most of the affordable housing in the state of Minnesota gets funded by Minnesota Housing Finance Agency, and so maybe we need to be working with that state agency on making sure that that's a priority when they're funding projects, putting a little bit of extra money in for accessibility at the property would be really helpful.
Another one last question.
I also have one. I want to check my perception. I'm a librarian and I work in southern Minnesota. And my perception is that solving broadband access at a home or a business is great if you're at a home or a business. But it seems to me that people live very fluid lives and they move a lot. They're in different parts of the world as they're living their lives in Minnesota. You know, they're here, they're there, they vacation here, they're there. And especially for our younger people or our less stable populations. And I'm wondering if that's as big of a problem as I see the problem that we need to give people access to the internet, to broadband, regardless of where they happen to be. You know, that there has to be enough public access points or some other way to carry broadband access with you.
For me, this kind of tracks the pandemic. In the early days, we did want to be sure that there were enough public facilities where there was good broadband. And so we built outdoor Wi-Fi libraries. And you know, these were things done in the initial period of stress and trauma where we were throwing ideas at the wall. The beauty and the curse of this problem nowadays is that there's not a one-size-fits-all solution for everybody. So we have really tried to provide hotspots to folks who are homeless or highly mobile. We've tried to provide ACP or Internet Essentials vouchers to folks who can get that, because there's pretty good availability for that in our county. But you're right, there's not a one-size-fits-all solution, and especially for folks who are low-income, folks who are homeless, it's a challenge. It's not a challenge that we have solved by any means, but I think having multiple different strategies is the way to try to provide options to folks depending on their life circumstances.
I'll try not to be too long because I think I'm standing between us and lunch. Michelle Mahensky with the Mid-Minnesota Development Commission, serving Candido, Iowa, and Renville counties. I'm here on behalf of the Candido County Broadband Committee. I want to take us back real quick. Over here mentioned that some people are having trouble getting the ACP because for whatever reason, their landlords aren't using that. So I'm only familiar with that program at a high level. Are there rules regarding eligibility with who pays the bill? Because as we move forward and you're working on those initiatives to get some of these maybe low-income housing buildings, getting that wireless service, getting that built in, then that may be more cost-effective for the landlord just to hook up the service and then just pay the bill and then it's built into your rent. So if there are, I don't know if there are rules, is that something that should probably change?
Oh, I'm sorry. We would really like to see that change. That's something that we're working with our, especially federal lobbyists on, because that would be a much more efficient way to run a program, especially in areas where we have, for example, public housing authority. We're gonna, if you're living in public housing, you're gonna be qualified for ACP, so is it just easier to provide it into the building? Those are areas that we're actively looking at right now.
And I think because the ACP is really set up right now for individual households, it's really challenging to do it any other way than what it's set up for. So, but I agree, I think it would be great if we could come up with some other solution. I think the challenge from a landlord perspective of putting one more thing in the rent is that suddenly rents become unaffordable. And so there's pros and cons to doing that. Some landlords are going to go with the most affordable rates, or it might start out affordable and then it becomes unaffordable, and not everybody can afford all of those services in their rent.
Thank you all for coming. I just want to take a little slow exit here and ask you to look around the room. Everybody in this room is a champion for some very vulnerable people. We've come together in person today, and 2 years this would have been possible. And so I think that we'll take the time and the courage we need to ask questions, be curious, learn from each other. There's a common denominator in all of us showing up to advance these issues that are going to affect a lifetime of public health, of economic development, of education, of the core capitals that work in our communities. I really appreciate the panel coming in, talking, and online, our folks online. I want to put a plug out for Alliance Corporate Ventures, who I think is online. If you're doing work in a tribal nation with jurisdiction issues, they're a great partner. They will share information of their experience. I'm blown away by the accomplishments they made with the counties where they have jurisdiction, complexity around tribal policy and law and history. I know Dustin will send me a text and be irritated that I did that, but he will do it anyways. Have a really good lunch. Thank you for all the work you do.
It is often difficult for us older Minnesotans to belong, to socially connect,